Hello, welcome to the Tech for Good podcast. We are very passionate about two things, technology and our world. In each pod, we will be interviewing some fascinating people, business leaders, but those with a special interest in solving the biggest issues facing humanity today. Think the environment, think healthcare provision during a pandemic, think global social injustice. If you want to know more about technology's immense potential to fix and transform, then you're in the right place. In this episode, we speak to Nick Kelly. As CEO of Axela, Nick has helped to drive innovation in the healthcare arena with his company's tech and data-centered approach to care services. His story is unique. In the interview, we cover how Nick was once headhunted by Apple, why he was destined to work in the care sector, and why he believes data is the future of healthcare, especially in a post-pandemic world. But first, you won't want to miss this extraordinary story of his early career. Okay, Nick, thanks for joining us here on the Tech for Good podcast. Obviously, I've done my research. I've looked into your career, and I've been told a lot about you. But I always like to hear, first of all, about somebody's career in their own words. So, do you want to start by giving me a sort of potted history of your story?
Thanks very much for inviting me on, Ben. You mean my eclectic history? I think my history is quite strange. So I've always wanted to be from, age of 5, and a massive cliche, and it's not after watching Top Gun, but I always wanted to be a pilot. It was the only job that in my mind I always saw when growing up, and friends were like, oh, I want to be a footballer, I want to be a fireman, I want to do this. I was like, yeah, I want to be a pilot. I want to fly planes. And also, I don't want to be just a commercial pilot. I want to fly planes where, like, fast. I want to see and push as much as I can. And I kind of did everything I could and spearhead everything to get to that point. But along the way, I decided that my natural entrepreneurial skill had to come out somewhere or other. So I think I set up my first company. I think I was about 17 or 18 years old. I think my first actual business loan was from my mother. So she loaned me, I think it was like £50, which is the 90s, which would have been a fair amount for us. But she loaned me £90, and what we did was we pulled together a cookbook. And I love, I'm from the Caribbean, so I'm all about home cooking, and I still advocate that some of the best meals I've ever had is when someone puts the time and energy into them and they're cooked at home. So that meal you get from your grandmother, that meal you get from your mum, it invokes memories, it invokes that feel. So when I was in sixth form, I kind of was like, great, I've got a great idea. So I emailed. So at this point, I spoke to everybody, and I spoke to all the teachers and said, can you all give me one recipe from your family that you would be happy to put together and show to other people? So, we had recipes from Malaysia, we had recipes from India, from the Middle East, from the Caribbean, from Africa. I took it all together and went, great. So I typed it up, cooked a couple of them, and took pictures. And I was like, right, I've got a cookbook. So got it bound. And then got it published and selling it, and actually sold it and used the proceeds to pay for university. So it did pretty well. But it was kind of what that made me realize at that time. You don't have to come up with, Facebook wasn't around, but you don't have to come up with the next Facebook. You have to take what you have and what you can do well and just put it together. It doesn't have to be big tech. It can be quite small, low rent products. And I'm not saying a cookbook is low rent, but I was taking what other people loved and putting it into one space and then using it. And everyone also then felt like they'd been involved. So everyone was then advocating it. So they were telling their family, oh, look, we've got this, and it's mashed with these, and look at this. And it was the first time I think it was when I look back at it, that's kind of how influencers work. But back in the 90s, influencers wasn't a thing, wasn't even a job or thing you put on your whatever Instagram or social media profile. And that for me was always a way of kind of getting where we wanted to get to. So we did that, and then we made recycled products out of, so we use like MDF and recycled materials to make small home furniture. So we were making like tables, CD racks, just picture frames, just anything we could that we could easily knock up, could create in volume, but didn't really need a huge amount of skill. And so we did that. And then after that, I went to uni, joined the Air Force, got the job that I wanted, and it was amazing for the time it was. It was amazing. Like I don't think I think the first day when I was walking towards an aircraft and I was like, right, I'm gonna fly this. They're gonna let me fly this. Is no one gonna stop me? And it felt like I'm walking with a helmet in my hand. I've got my flying gear on. I'm just like, someone has to stop. At some point, I'm gonna be told that this is a dream. And I just walked, and it just it's one of those moments where you can live a dream and get to a point and go, right, this is great. But it's an unattainable dream that I was living. And every moment I had to pinch myself and realize that I was privileged enough to be where I was, because after doing a 7 or 8 hour aptitude test and doing a whole day's medical and half a day's worth of hearing and eye tests, you were stripped down. I mean, it was, yeah, you literally were stripped down to your boxer shorts when you did the medical. But it was so, you had to get to that point. And it was something I just felt so proud of. So, like, it changed my outlook on a lot of things, and it really helped me to work out how to be stronger, and better. And then and then I was stupidly one night. I think I'd come back home for a weekend, and I was on a high after some stuff had happened, and I was in a really good place. And a friend of mine had just got a new bike. He was like, "Oh, do you want to go for a ride?" And I said, "Yeah, fine." So I decided to jump on the back of his bike. Um, and after about 10 minutes, we crashed at 80 miles an hour, hitting a lamppost. I tore all the ligaments in the left hand side of my leg, shattered my kneecap, and broke my leg, um, and have wasn't able to fly again. So after sort of 4 years of doing that, it was, what am I going to do now? What do I do? And I kind of had to go, what are you good at?
How difficult was that? Because you said earlier, this is the dream you'd had since you were a tiny boy. And the obvious kind of narrative here is that you've built up and you've achieved your dream, and then it's taken away from you so quickly. But you also said you've kind of got an entrepreneurial spirit, and entrepreneurs always tend to look at the kind of positives out of things. I wondered what your approach was in that moment.
I think I wouldn't say I was at the top. I hadn't completely achieved my dream. I think my dream was snatched away from me at a very early stage, because I was still, I mean, quite relatively young in my career. But I think what I realized was at that point was, things are so fickle and anything can be snatched away from you. So I had to work a little bit harder, but also appreciate what I had. Um, and then I kind of then sat back and I was like, okay, so what can I do? Like, realistically, what can I really do? And I've always loved design. I've always loved technology. I've always been that person that likes to take things apart and work out how they work. And I remember having even a computer when I was like 13 or something like that. So I said, all right, I'm gonna go into advertising. So I went and worked for a company called AKQA, and I was working there, and I left and did a few others. And through that journey, what I realized was, I don't like working for other people. I, what I realized was, in my mind, what you can do is this big, but in other people's mind, it's this big, and actually, it's all about, well, how much money can we make from this one thing? Let's not spend the energy to do this big thing if we can't do it. So I wanted to do my own thing. So I set up my own. A friend of mine, we set up our own media agency, and actually, we were running for 3 years, 4 years. He just got married, and I was actually doing his speech at his wedding. I was having to look. We ran for like 3, 4 years, doing our own product, and then that was really, really good. But I needed to learn. I constantly like to learn things. So one of my old clients when I was working in media offered me a role at Unilever, and that was amazing, because that really helped me to kind of learn technology. So we were building 100 and something country websites, doing like a whole lot of really big scopes and specs, but it was such an open job spec that I was having to think of so many different things. And because I was doing the technology side, I was having to be at the forefront. So we were the first ones to release an investor relations app in the App Store. And actually, the app was aimed at, I think, something like 13 people or whatever. It was downloaded 3,000 times. It was like the number one app in three different stores. But having to create a scope for something that no one had ever had, and it was nice because I was like, I was having to build the whole spec from scratch myself to give to the agency so they could build it, and then give to my boss to sign off on. And we took that, and I left there, and then I got a really strange, weird headhunted for a role that I kind of said it, but it's like it took 3 interviews before I actually got told who it was for. So the headhunter wouldn't tell me who it was for. The first interview was done in a cafe. The second was done offsite, and then I think it was like the third interview I went to, and I was even still. I at this point I still hadn't really known who I was going for the job for. I was just knowing that I had to basically. It was someone important enough that they wouldn't tell me who they were, and I had to be on my best behavior. So I had to kind of bring my A game. And I walked out the lift, and I saw a very familiar fruit-based logo behind the counter. And I was like, this all makes sense now.
Hello, I'm Daniel Brigham, editor of the Tech for Good magazine. I hope you're enjoying this podcast, and if you want more, why not head over to techforgood.digitalbulletin.com for some amazing and thought-provoking stories. How about AI's role in fighting the Californian wildfires? Or maybe one startup's mission to end illegal fisheries using satellites and machine learning. Read and subscribe at techforgood.digitalbulletin.com.
So after his time at Apple, Nick worked for LinkedIn and also co-founded a care agency in London with his mother. As he chewed over the possibility of a new role at LinkedIn, Nick decided to take a risk and instead jump in full-time at the care agency. That is what became Axela Group, and here he talks about the early days of making data and technology a priority.
So I came back into the business. We cleaned all the processes. We moved the office. And then what we realized, one of the things I realized was, 10 plus years of looking after people in their home, looking after people in hospitals, looking after people in care homes, we weren't holding the data in a usable format. And that's not to say look, before anyone jumps on and goes, oh, what's your data policy? No, we were taking care notes and we were basically putting them in a filing cabinet, or we were taking information and putting them in a computer. That's all we were doing. We were moving paper from here and putting it over here. That's all we were doing.
Yeah.
Why aren't we using that data? And actually, in most cases, the data in the community is valuable, is huge. You might see your doctor for an hour a year, if that. But the same individual might see their care worker for 60, 70, 80 hours a week. So why is the data from that person not being used? Why is the data from that person not as valuable as anywhere else inside the value chain? So we kind of set out, Martin and I mean, my ex-business partner, when we first set up Axela Innovations, what we wanted to do was create a product that could hold the data, but allow the data to be interrogated, but the data be put in a quantifiable and qualitative way, so it could be. So we built our first system, and then we reiterated it, which turned into Care ID. So Care ID allows us to hold all health and social care information on a person. We then are able to analyze that data and turn on and off as and when we want to, but it allows you to work out what's going on at any one time. That, for me, when we first tried to set out to build that was like, how are we going to do this then? And I think it was here. We basically just took a whole wall and just wrote everything down and just worked out how we thought it could work. We tried to map it. It was just, I think at one point we were doing mostly because it was quite topical, but we were doing like a Tony Hart style where you look at it, it was just individual little bits, and you stood back and went, oh wow, we have we have something here. And then we kind of reached, and again, kind of what we've always done is we've never had big budgets, so we were bootstrapping this whole thing ourselves. But what we were able to do was tap into a huge wide network of friends and family that had a skill set. So I reached out to some friends and said, look, does anyone know anyone that knows how to do AI or neural engine, or even just any like data manipulation? And we were put in touch with one person, and he then said, look, this guy that I studied with at Edinburgh, he might be able to help you. Why don't you reach out to him? So I reached out to him and told him what we're doing. Turns out he's the head of neuroscience and artificial intelligence at Edinburgh University. And he was like, love the idea. I mean, my daughter's just been sick and she went into hospital. So anything I can do to help, I will. I mean, I think this guy is like £5,000 a day consultancy fees to Google. We were getting him at like the price of a packet of crisps and a pint at best. But it wasn't because that's what we thought he was worth, but it was because of what he had. But it was just, we were passionate about the idea and we were trying to do something different. And in that same guise, I was like, well, actually, look, I've always been, I think, can share it for my first thing, but I've always been business minded. I need to start creating some structure. So we create Axela, and then everything then starts splitting out into it. So you've got a care agency, 2 care agencies, you've got assisted living, you've got training and consultancy, you've got technology. That all sits underneath the group structure. And that allows us to really simplify what we're doing. So we're building technology, we're testing technology, and we're probably one of the only ones I think can do this, where we're building technology over here, and then we're testing it with, 1,000 people that we're looking after over here, and going, well, this doesn't work, so let's change it. And then it's not that kind of test, break, and see. No, I'm putting it in. I've got care workers walking in and going, can you play with this? And they go, oh, that button's too big, and I go, great, I thought so. And I'm not having to wait weeks and weeks and weeks. I'm not having to roll out a big build. I'm having to test it. And I think coming from an environment where where people talk around about agile methodologies and agile building, being able to literally walk up to an end user and go, does this work for you? No, it doesn't. Okay, what would work? How would you want this to work? And I think that's quite unique about the way that the group has been structured. Is everything we're doing, there is another entity inside of it that would either benefit from it or can support it to work.
That's great, Nick. I really don't have to ask any questions here. This is fantastic. I want to take you back to that kind of decision you made, and obviously it's turned into a huge decision in your life when you then decided to kind of go away and do your own thing. You said you had the motivation to work for yourself, and I completely understand that. Obviously, going into a business like care, I don't know, it feels to me like you have to be a certain kind of person to do that, a certain kind of have a certain level of empathy with people. Do you feel like that was a motivation for you as well? Is it fair to say maybe like you were always going to kind of go down a route like that, or is it a completely different story?
I think naturally as a person, I want to help other people. I think naturally as a person, look, everyone says they want world peace, but it's something that I grew up as a Catholic, and I always wanted to help other people. And I was when I was younger, very tuned into the church somewhat. I say that with a smile on my face, but I was. But it was. You're drummed into about helping other people and doing things to help other people, and that's what your reward in the long term is. And I've always wanted, and because of that, I've always wanted to help. So inevitably, one of our second core value is making the world better for other people, and that's something that's been instilled in me from going to church, but also from my parents, that you have to help other people because you generally don't know what other people are going through at any time in their life. And I think that, again, that kind of mentality stemmed into some of the things we do in the office. So back end of last year, I think it was December, every member of staff did mental health first aid. So everyone is a qualified mental health first aider. And it wasn't because I wanted to tick a box, but it was because and I know he's going to listen to this, so please forgive me, but my best friend tried to commit suicide. And I think the signs were there. I just didn't know how to interpret them enough. And then actually there's a lot of people in my life that are struggling. But again, I wasn't sure how to help and support them. So it was nice to kind of do that. And then when I realized I benefit from that, I realized that everyone should be. And that's kind of what we do. So naturally being where I am, I think is where I was always going to end up. And helping people is something I want to do. For me, the long-term goal is to help people, is to make healthcare accessible to everybody. And that kind of feeds heavily into why we started building tech out. Is, from my perspective, the only way you can help and support somebody, and the only way you can actually do anything, is by using the data. And we take data from every other source to drive technology. But why are we not taking the data from the source in healthcare? I mean, and I think I explained it to somebody. You know more about your health and what's going on in your body than anyone else in the world. Your doctor might be able to tell you why it's happening, but they don't know what's happening. And someone said, "Oh no, my doctor knows. You mean I'm not medical trained? My doctor knows more." I said, "Okay, great. Go to your doctor and sit down for 15 minutes, say nothing to your doctor, then get up and go, so what pill should I take? What's wrong with me?" He's going to go, "Well, you haven't given me any information. So why are we not, do you know what I mean? Why are we not, that's what it is. He's using the data to inform his decisions. So why are we not using the data in the community to inform to inform proactive care, to inform the decision making?" Everyone kind of forgets that part of it, that they don't just get to this information by looking at you and going, "Oh, yes." You might look at someone and go, "No, that's a cut on your head." Yeah, I don't need you to give me any data. That is a cut. But in most cases, you do need some form of context to work out what's going on with somebody.
So and look, clearly your sort of natural empathy shines through. But yeah, I was going to bring it around to the technology point. When you're mapping out your sort of technology programs, as you have done at Axela, and we're talking here about sort of big projects. At the center of your motivation, is it that desire to help people? Ultimately, it's not about making your business more efficient or saving money. Obviously, those things are important, but is the primary motivation one of we can deliver better care if we do this?
Yeah. At some point I'm going to be a user of my own product, I assume.
Yeah.
So the best thing I can do is build the best product now that I can be proud of. I think there are only a couple of inevitables in this world. We all know birth and death, less so birth, but definitely death. Death is the only inevitable. Old age is also an inevitable. So how do I create something that will support me when I get to that point? How do I create something that will support other people when they get to that point? So when we're building, we went a whole year bootstrapping the product, tried to get investment, but we went a whole year bootstrapping the product because we believed so much in it, and we were working so hard to create what we thought was the best. And I remember we went for, I think it was Innovate UK, we went for Innovate UK funding, and someone said, "Well, what you're trying to do is too ambitious. What you should do is strip it back and just do one element of it." And I said, "Well, if I try to do just one element of it, that's not me feeling proud of myself. That's not me living my truth or trying to be what I want to be. I have to build what I think is the best. If I'm not moving the envelope that much further forward, then why?" And I'm not saying our product is the best. I'm not even going to say our product might be around in 10 years' time. But someone has to put a stake in the ground and say, "Right, this is the line you all need to get to. Now it's your turn to get better." And I'm not saying that that's what we've done, but what I'm saying is we draw our line in the sand, and we know that there are a lot of others that have tried and haven't even got close to where we have. And I still want to push. So one of the things we kind of started building is the consumer side of the product is holding your health records. It's holding your travel. Like if you ever go out and get, I don't know if you've ever been anywhere basically south of the equator, you need to get a bunch of like yellow fever, malaria. You get all these injections. You might forget when you had those injections. You also have to have that. I think yellow fever is the only one you actually have to have a passport for. You might forget that where that is. Okay, well, why can't you have that in a unified place? Why can't you track that? So when you do have your malaria tablets, your doctor knows you took malaria 2 years ago, and actually you're taking this other medication or you're taking something else. Why can't I, if I go abroad, why can't I take my medical records with me when I go abroad? Because I might need a doctor to input into that information. Why can't I? Because also what we call one bit of medication is completely something different in another country. How do I know what I'm looking for when I run out? Or how do I know that medication can even be taken into that country? And it's not these aren't big things. I'm not saying let's create something. I'm not trying to create a spaceship here. What I'm saying is let's take what we have, put it in a usable format. I'm a part of my own journey. I'm a part of my own information, and then let's start bringing everything else into the one place. Everyone right now, not everyone. That's a lie. A lot of people are thinking, the future of health is robots. I don't. I think the future of health is data. We still don't utilize people's data. So there's no point going into a hospital and having a robot that can, analyze stuff and having this cool hologram. I don't care about that. What I'd love is if I'm sick at home, I would like that information to be triaged to the hospital. And what I really want to do is when I go to my own GP or a hospital, I don't want to have to tell them about every last operation I've had and every last visit I've had to a doctor. I just want that they can pull it all up and they can give me the time of day. It's not, you know what I mean? It feels like a pipe dream.
Do you want to keep up to date with the latest in enterprise, technology, and digital transformation? Visit digitalbulletin.com for news, long reads, thought leadership, and so much more. That's digitalbulletin.com.
Why have healthcare and technology so often not been happy bedfellows? Why do you think healthcare is behind? And let's be frank, I don't know specifically about the care industry. You might tell me different, but we've spoken to many people who have said that, the problems run deep when it comes to technology and healthcare, not just on the innovation side, but also on the IT side and the data area as well. I mean, it's across the board. Why is it so bad?
I don't know. And that's probably the wrong answer.
I know would have been better.
I know. Realistically, my thoughts on that is who's deciding on this. And healthcare, I think a lot of other sectors, just aren't seen as sexy enough, right? When you talk about, the big companies, the big unicorns, they're not, from a startup perspective, they're not people that are trying to do health tech. When you talk about things that are really making and driving the world forward, you don't think of healthcare, but actually it is. It's one of those things that we all are going to get sick. Every last person on this earth will always at some point need food, and will always need health, and will always die. I think those are the three constants. Someone said to me years ago, there are 4 constants in this world. If you can build a product that meets any one of those needs, you'll be successful. If you can build something that meets all of those needs, you'll be onto a winner. And I think as long as you can, I think healthcare has always been underfunded because it's not seen as primary. I think it's always seen as a secondary thought. I think the big one is we've always been reactive with care. Health care, the whole lot. Let's call it what it is. When I say care, I mean both sides of it: healthcare, social care. We've always been reactive when it comes to care. We've always looked at when something happens, we will put gates and markers in place to help. But actually, if we move the needle forward and go into proactive care, there's so much we could save, so much more money. We can be so much more helpful.
Okay, no, all fair points. Do you think COVID-19 is having a positive impact then in that regard? Because we have had examples where we are having to build, the obvious example is apps for contact tracing, but other examples where technology companies, healthcare companies have had to come together and do things double quick time and innovate new solutions to combat this virus. Do you think there's going to be a sort of lasting impact and an improvement in the areas that we've spoken about?
I hope.
Yeah.
I hope there is. I think what I've definitely loved more the last 6 months, I haven't loved COVID, I think it's a terrible thing, but what I've loved in the last 6 months is the way innovation has forced people to work together and how people are trying to collaborate together. I think the previous 6 months and the last couple of years, it was never there. I think if it wasn't for COVID, healthcare wouldn't have got such a large billion. We've been talking about this social care green paper for 4 years or something like that, and it's never coming. we've been talking. You mean I've been speaking my GP and half of the GPs I speak to through work and stuff like that have been saying they want to start doing video consultancy, but they can't. But all of a sudden, video consultancy is huge. Oh, wait, I can speak to somebody in their home where they feel comfortable at a time that works for them, so they don't have to come into the surgery when they feel like they might be sick and probably don't want to speak to somebody. Oh, wow. I can also do culturally accessible care visits and doctor's visits. Oh my gosh. But you mean we had all these things. Video consultancies didn't start in the last 6 months. We've had video consultancies for the last 2-3 years. But what we've had is the government's gone, do you know what? Let's put this through. And I think I'm hoping that going forward, all these government funding and all these companies trying to collaborate and work together continue doing that, because the only way we're going to build better systems, build better healthcare, build better programs is by coming together. We were at a point where there's 62 different systems being used in the NHS. How many of them do we actually need 62? And how many of them could work together? We've got 4 electronic health record systems currently being used. Why? And 2 of them don't even speak to each other properly. And one of them no one wants to speak to. But do you know what I mean? We're using all these systems. I get we've got a bunch of suppliers that might be delivering better and cheaper products, and it's a free and open market, and it creates innovation. But all you've then got is go, okay, if you've got 4 people providing the health records, which one should I use? Oh, they're all roughly the same. Okay, so how do I choose? Oh, okay, I'm going to choose this one because I like this one because the sales rep was really, really good and I think the product looks the best. Oh no, the hospital over there is using that one. Oh, the 2 systems don't talk to each other, but I've just spent my money on this one. Oh, great. And I think that's what it is. I think we need to get to a point where, like in, say, banking and like in a lot of other sectors, where it doesn't feel so much of a Wild West. It feels a little bit more, and I think it has been. And I think I said to somebody that was, within NHS Digital, and I said, we've come to you with a product that we think is amazing and we think could work. And we know a lot of other people that are coming to you products that could work, and you're just completely ignoring it. But if I basically walked out, slapped a Google logo on the top of my deck and walked back in, you'd be biting my hand off. And it was like, no. I was like, no, when I worked for these big companies, I sold things into you that I knew cost a fraction of what the price was. But you was throwing money at it so much that we had to the prices went up. And that's what I think, that's the bit that's kind of somewhat disgusting, is we're not championing innovation from our own country. We're happy to speak to the big tech boys. Why? Is it a risk? Is it the fact that when something goes wrong, and I think people are lifers, but if something goes wrong when Google does it, Google goes into Parliament. Google's the one that someone from Google, their legal team, will come and explain what happened and give you, the legal speech. Something goes wrong with my product because I'm a startup. It's your head that's on the block, isn't it? It's you that has to explain why you picked me, why it went wrong. What things did you make sure that I was doing beforehand? And I think that's it. And I think that's probably why we weren't previously championing innovation enough. No one wants to take the risk. Everyone wants a job. And I think we created a culture of fear where people didn't feel like they could take a risk. They didn't feel like they could make a mistake. And I think overall from a entrepreneurship perspective, a lot of people go, well, I can't make a mistake. I've got one shot at it. Well, no, you don't. When you were learning to walk, you fell so many times. Like I've got my son, he's 2, and he's been walking for a while now. But when he was learning to walk, I was like, how? I was like, no. But we forget that that's natural. So to get to the point where you are, you have to make all those mistakes. And you might go, okay, Google let's call it Apple. Apple, the biggest company in the world. They probably don't make any mistakes. Well, actually, no. What you see is a product at the end of the year. But what you don't see is those 12 months of development where they go, okay, this is a bag of products. But you don't see all those mistakes. But even when you do see the mistakes are polished enough. And I think people forget that sometimes you have to make those mistakes. There is nothing wrong with creating something, it fails, and you pivot and make something else. I was a pilot, I failed, I pivoted, I now run a healthcare agency and a healthcare startup. I don't feel bad that I failed there. What I learned was I was trying to be a pilot, I fell over. I was trying to work for Apple. I fell over. I was trying to work for LinkedIn. I fell over. I worked for myself. I learned how to walk. I start running. We need to get the mindset out of our heads that we can't fail. You have to sometimes fail, rip things apart, and break it. Our platform isn't the first iteration. Myself and Martin spent hours, and we were banging our heads against it to try and make it work. And I think, kind of going into like the tech for good side of it, I think technology. I mean, I work with some amazing companies that are doing tech for good. For us, our pure reason to do what we do is to help other people. So, I mean, our platform, our consumer product, which we're launching later on in the year, hasn't got a price attached to it. There is no price because it's not about that. It's the data inside of it is what's going to help to drive the information. I don't want to monetize that, because if I start monetizing that, you're not going to use the product, because you're going to go, well, the only reason I'm using it is because you're paying me. No, I want you to use it because you genuinely see it's helping and supporting your lifestyle. And then the more you use it, the better it is, because the richer the content there is, the richer the data, the more I can start going, okay, you are this generic fact category. You're this category. You're this category. Hey, Nicholas. And that's what I want to get to. Person-centered care that everyone keeps championing and talking about. You can't be person-centered if I'm still in a statistic.
One more question, Nick, and look, this has been absolutely brilliant, and I think it's really fascinating to get the detail and the insights that you've given us. And forgive the cliche nature of this question, but during the pandemic, has it given you kind of a renewed sense of the values that you've just spoken about? Has it sort of given you and not just you personally, but the company as well? Has it given you sort of a different focus in a way? Because obviously lots of people are talking about that and how that might be the case.
I think through the pandemic, and definitely even now, it's made me proud of what I do. And that's not a cliche. There have been points where it was stressful. There have been points where, I mean, everyone knows the horror stories of no PPE and this, that, and the other. I think throughout the whole pandemic, I still now go, do you know what? I'm glad I'm doing what I do now, more so than any other job bar one that I've ever done in the past, because I can see from a equational perspective how my actions are affecting my staff, how my actions are affecting the people we look after, and I can see how we can make a difference. So over Christmas, and so from a company perspective, over Christmas, what we do on Christmas Day, we still work. So we work 365 days a year, or whatever we call it. Everyone forgets about that quarter, but we work 365 days a year. But on Christmas Day, I think 6 years ago, we started it for the first time, and we were cooking meals. And I think we cooked like 10 meals for service users that didn't have family near them. And I think it was about 2-3 years ago. No, it was about 4 years ago was when we did our first big one. And at that point, my operations director, who was heavily pregnant with her first child, her and her husband spent Christmas Day dropping meals. I think we did something like 30 meals. She dropped 10 meals and actually had Christmas dinner with a service user that didn't have anyone around her. And last year was the first. I think last year we were up to 250 meals or something like that, and we covered that ourselves. And actually, when I tried to explain it to like some other people I know that work in other companies, they're like, "But why would you do that if you're not making any money? Oh, are you PRing it, or are you putting it on social media?" And we're like, "No, we're not." Well, you should do, because it helps. And I was like, "No, we do it because there are people that don't have anyone, and our business is about helping people. So we can't just help people when it benefits us. We have to help people that when they need our help as well. And in the long term, those people help us out. So for me, what's happened amazing through COVID is the fact that we've pulled together. So we had, I think at most, we probably had 2 members of staff that were off sick. I remember speaking to, one care home that had 20 staff off. I speak to a care agency that had 80 staff off on one Friday. We lost 2. So it definitely this time made me remember why I did what I was doing, why we do what we do, and actually to continue doing what we do.
That was the Tech for Good podcast. Listen, subscribe, and rate us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher.